What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. So we have a bevy of interesting rumors, surveys, and touch points that have come out here, since the beginning of the week, right? And even dating back to last week. So let's kick it off with what brought a lot of you guys in here, I'm sure. Aaron Rodgers. If you would have asked me who was the most influential person in the NFL, my first forethought would be Patrick Mahomes. And if you are like-minded as well, we would be wrong. There was a survey done by Ticket Source, apparently, and this is based off of views, across Twitter and Instagram, Google, pretty much the major networks. And the most influential person in the NFL is Aaron Rodgers. Interestingly enough, and I'm still not sure about all the specifics, right? I didn't find many more details other than they're pulling it based off views from those, sources. But I don't know if that's supposed to mean influencing, ticket sales. Is this just, kind of a search-based result, something like that? Who knows? But it did get me kind of thinking along the lines of some of the conversations we've had recently with Aaron Rodgers, right? Specifically with me. As it relates to Aaron Rodgers running the team and stuff. And so, for better or for worse, Aaron Rodgers being the most influential person in the NFL is at least a tool in the war chest that the New York Jets can try to draw on, right? This relates to a couple other interesting narratives and rumors that were out there. But to kind of, dive into this conversation a little bit more. Now, this was a 0 out of 10 score. Rodgers got an 8.2 out of 10 to lead the way. Pretty much all the other top quarterback stars made up the top 10, right? Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes. The only non-quarterback, in fact, that was on there was Tyreek Hill in terms of being in the top 10. But with that said, you think about how that applies to the New York Jets. Currently, you're talking about him having the influence to literally provide job security to Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas, and Nathaniel Hackett in a season in which, as we've discussed, most other 31 teams in the NFL would have wiped their franchise clean and tried to distance themselves as far away from the performances that we've seen, specifically in the offensive side of the ball, as possible. That's not going to be the case here. I've been convinced to a certain degree we are going to see Woody Johnson allow this team to run it back the way it was supposed to look. Aaron Rodgers at the helm. You have your infrastructure in place with Nathaniel Hackett in a playbook specifically built together, not only with Aaron Rodgers, but for Aaron Rodgers. And with a new bevy of, seeing how the offense has looked under the guidance of Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle. Being able to kind of revamp things on that side in terms of his weapons, since you imagine we'll lose a Randall Cobb. Allen Lazard will return, but we'll see if he'll be, the de facto number 2 wide receiver. And then, of course, the offensive line, which will need some work. But this translates, interestingly enough, into some rumors from W fans. Boomer Esiason in regards to free agency for us, right? A lot of us have turned the page already. We're looking at the 2024 book now, draft picks. What are the draft prospects we may have available to us, assuming we have a top 10 pick. And then, of course, free agency, where it's definitely too soon to tell, but just contractually, you can see who might be out there on the market and who may not most likely get the franchise tags, right? So, Boomer, I've learned some things as I've jumped into just content creating, right? A lot of these guys are after clickbait and sound bites and stuff, and so this isn't the most credible source, but it's at least worth talking through, right? So Esiason, according to his source, has been told, I have been told that the Jets feel like it's harder to track free agents who are not Aaron Rodgers' friends to the Jets because of the field and the stadium. That was from inside the building, right? So he's talking about somebody specifically inside the facility that feels like this is a problem that the New York Jets team consistently has to deal with. And this wouldn't be the first that I've necessarily heard about this, right? In regards to Metlife, in regards to New York, you're talking about the high taxes, the cold weather, having to deal with the traffic. Of course, if you're building a brand and stuff, it's great over there, but there's definitely not a lot of negatives up front if you want to talk about open choices and being able to go to a certain designation. Now, Aaron Rodgers being on our side is a huge boon, right? You talk about a free agency miss last year in Orlando Brown. if we had Aaron Rodgers secured earlier, I feel like we would have Orlando Brown on this roster right now. And from what I remember, it's a significant enough contract, 4 years, north of $60 million, I believe, is what the rumors were in terms of a contract he would have got from us. But nonetheless, heading into 2024 with these thoughts in mind, that very well could be the case, right? Aaron Rodgers, his recovery story is going to help smooth over things in free agency, right? Because everybody's pretty much in the know about how he's feeling, how things are going. You're seeing him walking already, right? So there's great things there. There shouldn't be any reservations for people coming in considering Aaron Rodgers might not be ready, right? But it does get me thinking, how do we necessarily fix this, right? It's not just the fact that you have the taxes and all that kind of stuff. If you brush that aside, Aaron Rodgers' influence by itself should help things. We've seen players leave to let better quarterback in play. And ultimately, some of these guys, especially when you talk about more of the veteran guys, looking at their third and fourth contracts, and not necessarily the first time somebody's getting an extension, you're chasing a ring. I think that's everybody's general goal, but definitely heard a couple players talk about on, recent podcasts and stuff that have popped up, that at some point you have to go after the money, right? Try to create the generational wealth. Ultimately, the clout of, being a Super Bowl champion and stuff isn't always that desirable to everybody, right? Which is why you hear Robert Saleh talking about finding the kind of guys that play the game for the right reasons. With that said, though, we have to take a look at Metlife, right? Now, when it comes to Metlife Stadium, which we share with the Giants, we know there's been a gripe of issues, right? This season alone, you're talking about some pretty significant injuries. Aaron Rodgers going down 4 plays into the season. Our recent game with the Dolphins ended with Jalen Phillips suffering from an Achilles injury. We've had not only multiple members of the Dolphins call our field trash. We had Garrett Wilson, about a month and a half back, probably week 4 of the season, if I remember correctly. He ended up dealing with some ankle or calf issues, something like that. And even he ended up referring to this field and the turf that we're playing with as garbage, right? So not only are you getting it externally, which is always going to happen, but you're starting to get it internally as well. And I think that's something you need to definitely perk your ears up for if you're Woody Johnson. Now, there are some very interesting things surrounding MetLife, right? When you talk about, some of the recent surveys the NFL has done comparing grass versus turf injuries, not finding anything significant there. But you have the recent survey that came out also mentioning that MetLife is the least desirable stadium to play in. And once again, a lot of the commentary that you would have seen in there just refers to the stadium, the turf, etc. as garbage, trash, and then there was lame repeatedly throughout, right? The fans, the stadium, the turf, the whole ordeal. Just coming to MetLife Stadium seems like a long day for anybody that's coming in for an away game. You also have, going back into the injuries, you take a look at what happened this year and last year just in terms of internal injuries on our own. In 2022, our offensive line was so bad. It's statistically the 4th most injured offensive line in NFL history, which is nuts, right? I didn't think it really got any worse than that. And, we still have plenty of games to play. It could potentially get even worse than what we saw last year. I mean, again, we're almost hitting double-digit numbers right now in terms of the number of offensive line combinations we've had to try to come up with as, you see starters go down, then you see the backups go down, and the backups in many cases, right, leading to a lot of these roster gymnastics that you're seeing with the practice squad as we try to play around with the number of elevations you can use, which were capped at 3, different stuff like that. So it's been a very, very tough outing. There was something I seen that was interesting enough, and I can't verify this, but I figured I'd put it out there for anybody else who's actually checked this out already. Apparently, we're hosting the 2026 FIFA World Cup, and we're demanded or required, I guess I should say, to alter the turf to a grass field. And so if there's going to be any significant changes that the Johnsons actually look at, it's probably most likely to occur at that point. So needless to say, to kind of wrap everything up and put a bow on it, you have Aaron Rodgers currently being looked at as the most influential person in the NFL, which hopefully should help out with some of these free agency woes. But You also do, again, according to Boomer Esiason and his quote-unquote source, have these concerns from the New York Jets that we may not get favorable returns in free agency because there's a lot of hesitancy. Again, the high taxes, the Metlife Stadium turf, the weather, etc., right? Plenty of other places you can go to, especially if the money's going to be about the same, which really doesn't mean the same. It means you're going to get better returns because you're not paying, 50% of your tax money in taxes. And then you have this Metlife Stadium turf drama all kind of wrapped into one. So it does make me question how much we can actually alter this roster, which for the most part, I fully believe that we can generally probably only need to sign 2 or 3 guys on the defense. You talk about all the guys that we have on the practice squad in terms of undrafted free agent talents, and you should be able to focus a good 80 to 90% of your resources if you're Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett on this offense, right? I'd like to say you basically need a complete turnaround, but one of the points of emphasis I'll leave you guys here with, especially when it comes to the offensive line, is, and I've chatted with a lot of you guys in the chat about this, is the philosophy that we have on the offensive and defensive lines only seems to really be implemented on the defensive line, right? You can legitimately look at that unit and say we have 8 to 10 to maybe even 11, 12 starters when you take a look at practice squad players and stuff like that. The offensive line has never really been the case. You've always went into the season feeling like you had 2 or 3 positions you're really comfortable with, and then there's question marks, right? Not only with the starters, but also some of the backups that may need to come in there, injury history, stuff like that. I think we fully need to go in, and same thing heading into the off season, right? When we have upwards of almost 18 people on the defensive line at some point, we need to have a clinic of offensive line players that'll be coming in, fighting for positions, and we choose the best of the best. But nonetheless, let me know what your guys' thoughts are kind of on everything we've broken down here, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.